Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to be giving a brief overview of cloud computing and common cloud technologies in use by industry. My aim is to give you some ideas on how you might incorporate cloud computing into your teaching practice. I'd like to give some background to why I'm doing this presentation. Recently I attended the Govtech Cloud Computing 2013 conference hosted in Canberra. The conference highlighted how government organizations are adopting cloud technologies and how cloud computing is impacting the way IT is conducted. My presentation today will be largely based on what was discussed at this conference. As an IT teacher, this was a great opportunity. Of course, as TAFE instructors, it's critical to ensure we're delivering up-to-date technologies to ensure our students are prepared for industry. As you know, cloud computing has rapidly been taken up by industry, so our students need to have skills around cloud technologies. With this in mind, I went to the conference with a few key questions in mind. I asked myself, what skills will IT graduates need in the cloud environment? What cloud technologies are being adapted by business? What cloud technologies will be at the forefront when our IT students graduate? What benefits do businesses see with migrating to the cloud? And what risks do businesses see with moving to the cloud? And how are they working around those risks? One thing that stood out to me at the conference was that government organizations are really just starting to get into the cloud. We heard speakers from different government departments who we considered to be the early adopters. The majority of government departments have not yet gone into the cloud. However, most are now putting together plans on how they might get there. A quote made by Scott Houston, who's the CEO of Greenbutton, really stood out to me. He said that any IT manager who doesn't have a cloud solution for the board better get one or find a new job. This means our students will be entering into a workplace that will be looking for IT professionals who have a strong understanding of the cloud, how to implement it, and also how to manage it. There is and will be a strong demand for it going forward, so we need to ensure that we are training students to meet this need. Just before we get into the presentation, I'm just going to go over the contents just in case you would like to skip ahead at any time. We're going to look at an overview of cloud computing and really define what cloud computing is and discuss the different layers. We'll talk about the advantages of cloud computing, the drawbacks of the cloud, current industry trends, and also I'll give you some examples from the conference. And we'll talk about the different cloud products that are out there at the moment and the different organizations that are using them. I'm going to highlight two particular products that would be useful to teachers, students, and they are Google Apps for Business and Amazon Web Services. And also we'll just really briefly discuss some of the job skills that may be required. Before we get right into it, it's important to talk about cloud computing and really define what it is, because there's a lot of different perceptions out there on what cloud computing is, and I'd really like to talk about how I see cloud computing. And of course you might have a different understanding, but it just helps, to put each other on the same page really before we begin. So today's users require 24/7 access to a variety of business applications. To meet this ever-changing business need, organizations need to invest time and resources to scale up their IT infrastructure, such as hardware, software, and services. However, with on-premises IT infrastructure, the scaling process may be too slow or expensive. With such a model, enterprises are frequently unable to achieve optimal utilization of their IT infrastructure. Organizations generally have peak times where IT resources have a high utilization, and non-peak where they sit idle, costing the organization. So we see cloud computing emerging as a solution for this issue. Cloud computing is a paradigm shift that offers computing over the internet. With cloud computing, you only pay for what you use. A cloud computing service consists of a highly optimized virtual data center. They provide a variety of software, hardware, and information resources for use when needed. Organizations can simply connect to the cloud and use the available resources on a pay-per-use basis. This helps companies avoid capital expenditure and additional on-premises infrastructure and allows them to instantly scale up or scale down according to their unique business requirements. You can effortlessly set up cloud computing services by utilizing three distinct models as mentioned below. And those three models are private cloud, public cloud, and hybrid cloud. And really, a private cloud operates exclusively for one company on a private network, and it is highly secure. So really, when we think about private cloud, we're talking about the cloud infrastructure that really sits behind the firewall of an organization. Alternatively, a public cloud is normally owned and maintained by the cloud service provider. Public cloud offers the highest level of efficiency in case of shared resources. So with a public cloud, it's hosted by a third party, and organizations can tap into that and they can use those resources of that third party on a pay per use basis. Okay, so that way, if a company has a large project that's coming up, they can simply tap into those resources rather than having to host the infrastructure on site. Really, this is the most efficient model. However, there are some issues around using this model, and we will discuss those later. With relation to public cloud, there are a few different models that we can look at. And they are as followed. They are infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So by using the infrastructure as a service model, or what we commonly abbreviate as IaaS, organizations gain infrastructure components such as computing power and storage capacity. Here the organization has control over the entire IT infrastructure, including the hosting environment. However, the organization needs to allocate additional staff to maintain and manage the infrastructure and applications. Basically, with this model, an organization can tap into a public cloud provider's infrastructure, and then they can actually install their operating system on top of that infrastructure, and really they pay based on how many resources they're using, and they might be memory resources, CPU resources, storage, etc. We then have PaaS, or platform as a service, and this model provides organizations with a platform or runtime environment to create and deploy applications. Here the organization is only responsible for the development, maintenance, and management of the applications. We then have the SaaS model, which is software as a service, and really one of the most common models in cloud computing today. This model provides organizations with ready-to-use applications. They use a combination of cloud-based compute and storage services. So really with this model, organizations get direct access to the application. They don't have to manage any of the underlying infrastructure as with the other models. So really some examples to help illustrate what SaaS is would be Google Apps for Business, whereby you can access your Office applications directly through the browser. And there's plenty of other ones. Microsoft have a new online Office as well, Office 360. That's another example of that, and a common one that organizations are actually using. So really, just to review cloud computing, I'd just like to quote cloud computing as it's defined in Wikipedia. Cloud computing is the use of computing resources, be it hardware or software, that are delivered as a service over a network, typically the internet. Okay, I'd like to move on now to the advantages of cloud computing. Now, as you see on the screen in front of you, there's a list of advantages the various presenters mentioned at the conference. I put quite a few down there because these are directly from my notes, and some of them might actually overlap a little bit, but I thought it was important just to put the advantages down as different presenters saw them, because obviously different people have different understandings of what the advantages are. So I'd like to discuss some of the key points here that you see in front of you. and really kind of expound upon them a little bit more. So really we can start off, pick one here, no idle resources. Now that was really quite a big one that came up. Uh, with cloud computing, obviously, if you're tapping into a public cloud computing model, you pay per use, and that's essentially, or well, especially with something like Amazon EC squared, which was we'll talk about later, whereby you pay for infrastructure. You basically pay only for what you use. So no longer is that requirement there to have a really large data center that's only really used to its peak, during a few hours of the day. You can actually pay another organization really for their resources, and you only pay for what you use. And again, that brings us into another one, another really key benefit here, which is no upfront software and hardware procurement, which we can see for a second from the top there. What do I mean by this? Well, it means that we no longer have to go out, when we want to launch a project and buy all the servers and spend all that money on the equipment that's only going to have a limited use. We can simply then, like I said before, just tap into a cloud provider's resources and just pay for what we use. Speed of delivery is another one there. You can set up a cloud environment quite quickly. There's no wait time in the actual procurement of the hardware. It's definitely another advantage that is seen. Another big advantage here, especially with software as a service, with things like Google Apps for Business, Microsoft 365 Office, is that they're accessible from any device, anywhere, anytime. Because software as a service is accessed through the browser, there's no need for a piece of software to be installed on a computer. You can just access it directly from any device that's capable of browsing. And most cloud providers will build the application to be supported by multiple devices. So users can all of a sudden use the software as a service application on their iOS devices such as tablets or Androids. They can access them from their PCs as normal, even from their phones. This really opens up a large productivity increase. So this is definitely another advantage that organizations do see. Another one down here is high availability built into the service. Now, of course, with organizations, availability is obviously critical, and having those really high uptimes can be quite difficult to achieve because you need to have a lot of infrastructure, in order to have that redundancy. Although when you access the cloud, you automatically have really access to that redundancy via the cloud provider, because they're going to have that set up to ensure that they have the right uptime that they've promised you. So automatically you kind of outsource that cost there, and really it opens up DR for small businesses that they never previously could have, because they could never afford, obviously, or justify the investment and infrastructure required to have really high availability. Flexible licensing is definitely another big thing there, where you pay for what you use. You can automatically scale up and scale down your licensing, whenever you need. You're not locked into any specific licensing contracts.